Member for Courtenay-Comox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is a great privilege for me to stand here to speak to Bill 7 today. I was a member with the Residential Tenancy Housing Task Force. I always get too many words in that name. I really appreciated the leadership that the MLA from Vancouver West and Cole Harbour provided. His many years of experience have been given us across the board a lot of opportunities to help to advocate for more fairer processes for everyone. And I wanted to just share a little bit about the experiences that I had going from place to place across the province. You would think that tenants and landlords have the same kinds of experience in every community, but that was not the case, not even close. The experiences with landlords in Terrace was so very different from the experiences of landlords in Burnaby. Tenants in the interior experienced a whole different set of circumstances than Vancouver or Victoria. And so coming to we got hundreds of submissions. We heard hundreds of organizations and individuals coming forward with a vast array of experiences. Landlords who had tenants who were, I can't use a word in this house for what they were described as. And we had tenants who had landlords who were considered monsters. The people we didn't get are the people, the vast majority of people who just are living their lives, going about their business, making sure that they can pay the rent, taking care of their homes, landlords who were taking care of their investment, and building relationships. Because that's one of the big things that we found, is that when conflict arises, it's because there's a broken relationship. And that's kind of the key, which makes the issue of the marketplace with housing so different from any other entrepreneurial enterprise, whether you own a big apartment building or whether you own a house with a suite in it. And that's, oh, excuse me. I don't know if I sounded muffled. And that's the key, is that there's a human element to the enterprise. And so it demands a very different lens. And we certainly got to hear about what would be the right way to go about things. And the issue of fairness and creating balance was so important that we have an open ear and listen to all parties. And so I think that we came to a good balance from all those hundreds of submissions and just as many recommendations to pare it down to something that was realizable. And I have to say that the folks who organized all of the meetings did just a fabulous job of it's kind of like corralling cats to be able to have those conversations in a few hours in different communities and come up with something that's substantial. And they shared it very articulately, so to help guide us in what was the best way forward. I think that one of the comments that I've heard from speakers from the other side is that we haven't done anything. Well, we got to business right away. And I think that that's a tribute to our public services as much as it is to the commitment of our government to find ways to close the fixed term leases, the loophole that was causing rent increases. We gave more time around renovictions. We increased compensation. Those are the sorts of things that made a difference immediately without requiring, excuse me, quite the degree of legislative research that was required to make sure that you get it right. Excuse me. We also saw an increase in education. We saw the resources to the residential tenancy branch increase so that the time in which disputes could be resolved, people get the answers to their questions, reduced significantly after years and years and years of frustration and really trying this sector in our society, which is so vital for everybody to have a roof over their heads. I was really impressed with the immediate impact with the Compliance and Enforcement Unit. When they were introduced and there was opportunity for redress, and it made the ability to be a landlord, it made the ability to be a tenant that much more secure, because there was a place to go, there was somebody who was going to listen. And we also ended up with a liaison officer to help with those resolving issues before they get out of hand. I just want to talk about the rent freeze first. This is within the legislation that's before us today. It takes us to the end of 2021. We have been dealing with COVID over the space of a year. Actually, it was on March 13th, I was going to have a workshop in my community with TRAC, the Tenant Rights Advocacy Center. They were going to come over from the Lower Mainland, and the night before, Friday the 13th, I had to cancel it because we knew that the province was going to be shut down. And people's lives were changed. And one of the first things that we started to hear about was how people were worried about how they were going to pay the rent. And by freezing rents and by stopping evictions, it gave people some security while they got their lives in order during this pandemic. And as we've progressed through the pandemic and people have gotten back to work, it's been an opportunity for people to stand up proud and pay their rent, and if they were in arrears, to find ways to move forward and get those debts paid back in a reasonable way when they're dealing with such constraints. And in fact, we have the lowest rental arrears in the country outside of Newfoundland, which is pretty impressive that we're doing all right in British Columbia. Some of us are struggling harder than others, for sure, but we have set a path forward to make life more affordable. And that rent freeze, while it is, again, a constraint on landlords that they can't raise the rent, it's also, we have a program called the Recovery Benefit, which can help, it helps people throughout British Columbia who are in a variety of circumstances to make it through where there's been some losses. I just want to recall that prior to 2017, the rent increases were up to 4.3% increase, far above inflation. And if rents were allowed to increase today, inflation is down. There's no additional, would be no additional allowances. It was 1.4. But even that can make the difference between somebody being able to buy that loaf of bread to make sandwiches for their kids to take to school. Those are the sorts of decisions that you make during the tough times. And so I am very glad that we are freezing it until the end of the year. People who have gotten notice, even now, don't have to pay a rent increase. They may not know that. Come September, there's a possibility that people will see their notices, and they will take effect in 2022, but not before that. One of the other issues that's, I want to talk about the rent increases, because we also heard another member talking about student housing. And it is true that student housing doesn't pertain to this particular piece of legislation. However, the Ministry of Advanced Education, Skills and Training's program to bring up to 8,000 housing units for students, of which there are now 5,000 that have been created since 2018. They are tied to, they have been priced and supported below market value. And I got some of the numbers just before I came in here. BCIT in Burnaby, their rent for those student housing units is 10% below market value. At Coast Mountain College in Terrace, it's 15% below market value. And in the College of the Rockies in Cranbrook, it's 30 to 40% less than the market value. I mean, that's pretty significant. And it's a real recognition that students are living a vastly different world than the rest of us. And the constraints that they have around being able to earn money while they're getting an education is very tough. Oh yeah, we also stopped interest on the BC student loans. And that has an impact on affordability. In terms of housing, it's not just the students. Once you've graduated and you still have a debt load and you don't see debt rising because you don't have interest, that gives you opportunity in the future. That gives you, when you're out of the student housing, a place where, a space to be able to pay rent within the marketplace. One of the other amendments is around stopping illegal renovictions. Come July 1st, there'll be a whole dispute resolution process is a replication of something similar that's happening already in Ontario. And it's not about trying to stop landlords from maintaining their properties. It's about landlords who would take an opportunity beyond the scope and try and evict people for things that are not substantial, for which people do not have to leave the home. And that's important. That's important because it is about that security of tenancy. It doesn't stop renovations, and it doesn't stop people from being able to maintain their properties. In fact, it's continuing to be encouraged, and something we're looking forward to in the future is around a process to allow landlords to find ways to recoup their costs when they do more substantial renovations, while still maintaining that same tenant. I wanted to quote David Hutniak from Landlord BC, because on this legislation, he's saying that it mitigates what has at times been an unnecessarily confrontational process. And I go back to what I said earlier around this. This is about relationships. And when you set up a system that doesn't work unless there's confrontation, you're not helping the situation. And this is paving a much more positive path forward so that we can have a more robust rental housing marketplace for both tenants and for landlords. I'm going to talk about the question around procedural fairness. We heard a lot from people who wanted to not have to jump into the courts for judicial review on matters that were not trivial, but not so substantive that they needed to go, that they were barred from getting justice because they couldn't afford the lawyer to take it up for judicial review. So taking that forward to expand the grounds for procedural fairness is something that people really wanted to hear about. They wanted to hear us taking action, and we have, and that's what's coming forward with this amendment. I think I've mentioned already about the compliance and enforcement unit. And just to reiterate what they are getting more of, taking a good thing and making it better, is that they're being given more authority for investigation to compel records. They will get more authority around levying administrative penalties and being able to apply penalties for false or misleading information. This is again paving the way for a much more positive road for people when they're considering becoming a landlord, if they're considering making an investment in something as difficult. I raise my hands to people who become landlords, because it's not easy. It's not like buying something that just appreciates in value. You have relationships there, and you're not going to get the best bang for your buck in your investment unless you work on that human element. And so it's so important that we make sure that we create a system that helps landlords to make good on those kinds of investments that they're making. I also wanted to point out as well that this legislation brings in a way forward to avoid the layers of hearings that landlords would need to get orders for outstanding rent that might be owed. So instead of having to go back for a second hearing, they get to have it dealt with at the time. And so this is that balance of finding ways forward that are about fairness. I wanted to talk about the one piece that I haven't heard a lot about. I think I heard the previous speakers mention it, the manufactured home parks. That's something near and dear to my heart. I grew up all over Canada, and sometimes living on military bases, and always there was a section of the PMQs, permanent married quarters, that was manufactured homes. We didn't call them manufactured homes at that time, but that's what they were. And it becomes a lifestyle. People take their homes with them from place to place. Not all manufactured home parks are like that now. They're a lot more permanent, but they're affordable. This is affordable housing for so many people. And one of the challenges, though, is that they have that pride of ownership of owning their home, but they don't have the security of the space where they park it. And one of the challenges that we heard while we were on the road, let me finish this piece first, was the challenge of not having that security. And when the mobile home park owner, the manufactured park owner, changes the rules and makes the circumstances so that you can't stay there, there's no security in that, and there's no sense of fairness. And this legislation is going to do something about that. We're going to see the opportunity for those homeowners and the manufactured home park owners to consult on a regulation to see how often park rules can change. And one of the more substantial pieces that's within the legislation itself is the fact that there will be, it clarifies that mobile home park, said it again, manufactured home parks rules cannot be changed to override your tenancy agreement. And that's something that people who rent, that's sort of a basic tenet of being a tenant, is to know that you can't have rules and it's a bit tenet of life that you can't have rules that override legislation. And it's the same thing. If you have an agreement in place, you can't override it. by just unilaterally changing the rules. So these are all just, they're substantial pieces to making life more secure, making life more affordable, and making good on our promises that are not quite finished yet. We know that there's still more work coming, but it's getting there. We're working. We know that we're working hard to continue to make life better. I wanted to. I almost interrupted myself earlier. I wanted to talk about the trips that we had to different communities and hearing people's experiences. And I remember I just wanted to share this because Prince George is an amazing place. I never got to visit Prince George before I was in MLA. And I got to go to one of these events, and it was very well attended. And I was walking back to my hotel, and a thunderstorm started. And my hotel was in downtown Prince George, and you could see it coming. And I sat in my window of my hotel room, and for half an hour I was filming with my little phone because it was like a strobe light show. And knowing that there were people living out rough and having to endure that was, while it was amazing for me to be safe inside, to look out and watch, to know that there are some people that were having to experience that. It was pretty tough. But I also got to see on my walk back to the hotel room a new foundry that was opened up, one of our mental health and substance use wraparound services for youth. And it was very uplifting to know that we're making a difference every day and in different ways to make life better for all British Columbians. Just on a final note, I got stuck in the Prince George airport for 8 hours on that trip. And because of that storm and because of wildfires, the people of British Columbia have shown just how resilient they are. They endure weather like no other that I've ever experienced. They have endured floods. They have endured incredible wildfires. And sometimes they endure a lot of hardship because life has not always been affordable. And I'm just so proud since 2017 that we have taken steps every single day to make life more affordable, to bring the services that people need, and to be able to build a more sustainable future, not just in the downtown Vancouver, but throughout all of British Columbia. I appreciate the committee work that I get to be a part of, where I can go and have some comradeship with people from the different parties that sit in this House, and find some common ground, and also to find ways forward together. And as we go forward with COVID and the vaccination program, I know that landlords, tenants, and people throughout British Columbia will work together to make sure that we all get the protection that we want and that we need and that we can move forward. And I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to this amendment, and I look forward to seeing the passage of this Bill 7.